Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
But I can't hear my voice in the left myself.
Dr. Samir Malhotra has also joined.
Yes,
He is
sir.
out of station. He is from Kolkata. He is logging.
He has
He has
joined
logged
Dr.
in already.
Sridhi. है ना? So should we start, sir?
Yes, please go ahead. Yes, we'll start. Yes.
Yes.
Can take the permission from the president, madam.
Yes, we will start, please.
Okay, madam. So, dear all participants, good afternoon to everybody. Respected President of NAPT, Dr. Padmaja Uday Kumar, madam. General Secretary, Dr. Dikshit, sir. National Coordinator, Dr. Kamal, sir. Editor of NJPT, Dr. Badiyal, sir. And Chairman of Workshop, Dr. Denis Javier, sir. First of all, let me thanks to our association for giving me the opportunity to serve as organizing secretary for this national online GCP workshop. As all of you know, that GCP is an international, ethical, and scientific quality standard for the design, conduct, recording, and reporting of clinical trials. All investigators and staff who are involved in the conduct of any clinical trials are required to complete training in GCP and refresh this training regularly to update the knowledge. This is even more pertinent given the many changes and amendments in clinical trial and new drug approval rules and regulation in India in recent years. We are having total 8 topics in this workshop, starting from overview of Indian GCP to silent features of NDCT 2019. All resource persons are the stalwarts in their respective topics, and hence we hope that this would be a great experience for all our dear participants. Now I request organizing chairperson of the workshop, Dr. Denis Javier, sir, to address the gathering.
Right.
Over to Dr. Denis, sir.
Right. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all, and it's my privilege to say a few words this afternoon. So this is really a wonderful opportunity for all to participate in this GCP training workshop, and we have tried to make it as convenient as possible for you. Some of you may say, I already have training in GCP. Why should I do another one? So after almost a quarter of a century of working in clinical trials, I believe that the more we learn and the multiple perspectives that we get on GCP, the better clarity we have. So for example, today itself, you have 2 speakers, Dr. Sanish, who will give you his perspective from an industry, and I'll give you a perspective from academia, although this is, topics are common to both. So we also have speakers who are very diverse and more importantly, experienced. So I'm looking forward, and welcome again.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable guidance and for accepting our invitation to act as an organizing secretary chairperson for this national workshop. Now I request NPT President Dr. Padmaja Uday Kumar, madam, to guide the participants. Over to Padmaja, madam.
Dear members of the pharmacology family and all doctors with us today, Namaskar and a very good afternoon to all of you. We are back with our GCP training program again, and thank you all for the overwhelming response. The program, another feather in the cap of our NPT, is very meticulously organized by Dr. Dakale, Dr. Kamal, Dr. Dennis Xavier, and the entire team. I congratulate them and thank them for all their efforts, and I'm sure you will find it very useful. It's a great pleasure to see the growth of NPT. In fact, it's heartening to see how many pharmacologists, so many of them are taking up life membership of this society, that is NPT. Also, in fact, even without us going on a membership drive, there are so many of them are taking up the membership. I thank all of them for the faith in us and for the response. Hope all of you are aware of the national conference to be held at Lucknow this December. Thank you once again for your continuous support. Jai.
Thank you, madam, for your valuable inputs. Now I request our General Secretary, Dr. R.K. Dikshit, sir, to address the gathering. Over to Dikshit, sir.
Please unmute Dr. Dikshit sir. Dikshit sir, please unmute. We are not able to hear. Can somebody unmute Dr. Dikshit sir?
Is already unmuted, sir.
Dikshit sir, please unmute yourself. We are not able to hear you.
दीक्षित सर, आपका दूसरा मोबाइल में है ना, उसमें अनम्यूट कर लीजिए सर अभी.
Okay.
हाँ, now we can hear. ये वाला लैपटॉप वाला म्यूट कर लीजिए सर.
Hello.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
audible, sir.
Now I think I am audible. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
So good afternoon, everyone. Very warm welcome from our association to all of you. And just reminding you all that CBME curriculum in the medical education for the postgraduate, they are wanting all sort of documentation and authentication of the things. So these type of workshops which we are organizing regularly, they will be beneficial for not for the faculty but for the students who are doing pursuing postgraduate in not only in pharmacology but in other streams also. And their certificates, they can put their certificate into their logbooks and portfolio, and that certificate can be utilized to enhance their showcase of their profile. So that will be a beneficial not only for the knowledge purpose but as well as their academic showcase in the future. So I wish everyone the best of best and hope that the conference will be great success. Thank you.
Thank you, Dikshit sir, for your valuable advice. All of you know that our NPT coordinator, Dr. Kamal sir, is always ready with innovative ideas and doing the association work 24/7 for the success of NPT. Thank you, sir, for your hard work. And now I request sir to release the video of the workshop.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very
Thank you, Dr. Kamal sir, for preparing the nice video. Today we are having two sessions. First is on overview of Indian GCP and second is on responsibilities of investigators, sponsors and monitors. The first session will be moderated by Dr. Samir Malhotra sir. Sir has done DM in clinical pharmacology in 2000 from PGI Chandigarh. Presently, sir is working as professor and head Department of Pharmacology, PGI Chandigarh. Sir has received UK SED prize for best paper presented in clinical pharmacology at the annual conference of IPS at Chennai 2005. Sir has also awarded Major Amir Chand Silver Medal for his work. Sir has also more than 100 publications in national and international journals and written 4 books up till now. I welcome you, sir, for the session. The second session will be moderated by Jagruti Bhatia, madam. Madam is presently working as Professor, Department of Pharmacology, AIIMS, New Delhi. Madam is also member of Institute Ethics Committee for Postgraduate Research. She is President-elect, Indian Society for Atherosclerosis Research, Delhi chapter, and executive member of Indian Society for Atherosclerosis Research. Her current research work focused on myocardial infarction, cardiac hypertrophy, and pulmonary fibrosis. Madam has also published more than 60 publications in international and national journals. I also welcome Madam for the session. Now I request Dr. Malhotra sir to introduce today's first speaker, Dr. Shanice Davis sir. Over to Malhotra sir.
Good afternoon to all. It's nice to see a lot of people gathered for this CME. Am I audible?
Yes, yes. Shani Davis,
Okay. So please put the slide for Dr. Dennis.
sir. Yes, just a minute, sir.
I have known him for many years, a wonderful scientist and a clinical trialist of great repute. He is currently in Janssen's. He is the R&D director. He also is one of the founders of the ISCR, that is in Indian Society for Clinical Research. And currently he is the president of the ISCR. He's basically a clinical pharmacologist and a fellow of American College of Clinical Pharmacology. For the last, I think, more than 2 decades, he's been in industry and played various roles. He's, greatly interested in education, which is of, much help to us academic people. So, Dr. Shanice Davis, please start the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Malhotra. Always a pleasure when we are on the same stage. So, at the outset, thank you to NPT for this opportunity. Being the opening batsman has its own advantages and sometimes its own disadvantages. The advantage obviously is because I'll be speaking before Dr. Dennis. That's a great advantage. And of course, the disadvantage is that Dr. Dennis will come after me, and we all know, you could say, the kind of work Dr. Dennis will be presenting. So with that, my presentation today is more of, you could say, trying to see what are the differences or what actually made India actually come up with a guideline, which sometimes people might think that it is almost similar to that of ICH GCP, right? And that's where I want to kind of like dwell a little bit of time to actually say that, are there any differences which are unique for India when we do clinical research? And if yes, what are they, right? And we could also then, if we have a little bit of time, maybe take a couple of questions. These slides will be given to you, so you don't have to worry about taking notes, etc. You can just kind of like bring in your thoughts probably at the end of it. So whatever I'll be doing is obviously from my own end, not from any industry organizations or any of the institutions that I've been associated with. So quickly over the next 20 minutes, what we will see is just to kind of like introduce the subject of regulatory environment in India, right? Many of you who might just be starting out as postgraduates or even in the early part of your career as an assistant professor, etc., would always wonder what are the different, you could say, regulatory infrastructure that is there in India for doing clinical research as well as clinical trials. My talk will basically cater to doing pharmaceutical industry or what we call as regulated clinical trials. Dr. Dennis will talk about more from the academic side of things, and there is, of course, great correlation between both of them. We'll then go into what is the difference between regulation and guidelines, quickly see what the ICH GCP guidelines mean. And ICH GCP is like not just one guideline, but there are several guidelines on a plethora of topics, but we will just talk about one of them, which is on, you could say, GCP. And this is called as the E6 guideline, for those of you who are aware about this. And then we'll come to the Indian GCP guidelines, which came out in 2001. And then quickly into what are the difference between Indian GCP guidelines and ICH GCP. And then last slide is, of course, more philosophical as to what are the next step for Indian GCP. So in India, there are several different departments in the government which actually regulate clinical research. And when I say clinical research, there is also the important part that it also regulates a lot of the commercial side of the pharmaceutical industry. So you have under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, the department called as CDSO, in which the head of CDSO is the DCGI. And the DCGI office actually regulates the new drug approvals, anything which is related to approvals at a national level. Then we have the Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers, which actually talk about pricing and other stuff, commerce and industry on patents, exports, because that is also important from a research perspective. Even when India is pushing more for R&D, anything which is discovered in India has to also be patent protected, right? I mean, otherwise somebody in other parts of the world might even copy that. Ministry of Environment and Forest actually look after a lot of these recombinant DNA, RNA, and all these technologies. And Ministry of Science and Technology is involved with biotechnology or DBT, etc. And then each of them at a central level, at a state level, and there are combined, you could say, regulatory authority levels that are there. But generally, I think the central level is more about introducing legislation or regulations, as we say, and then, of course, setting standards other than other approvals and others. At a state level, it is more of licensing activity for manufacturing facilities for drugs which are, you could say, the generic drugs which are made in India, etc. And then, of course, they also regulate pharmacies and other stuff. Now, putting it all together, I mean, this slide actually gives the different kind of relationship between these different ministries and etc. Sometimes it's very difficult to actually navigate also. But if you can concentrate on the centerpiece, because that is the one which is relevant to my talk. So a MOHFW, under which you have a health secretary, then you have a DGHS, Director General of Health Service, under whom sits the CDSO office, that is Central Drug Standards and Control Organization. The head of CDSO is DCGI, or Drugs Controller General of India. And then you have under the CDSO several drug testing laboratories across different parts of India. And then at the state level, you have the State Drug Regulatory Authority, which is the FDA. And from the other ministries, like for Science and Technology and the Ministry of Environment, you have, when you have a recombinant DNA technology, or you have a genetic engineering like a hybridoma technology, or stem cells and others, there are a lot of these coordination which goes from there, and approvals too. CDSO or DCGI does not work on its own, right? I mean, there are a lot of, you could say, committees and others which actually help in its work on a day-to-day basis. So some of these are listed here. By far, the more important ones are the DTAB, the subject expert committee meetings, which actually define not only clinical trial approvals, but also you could say new drug approvals in India. So that is there. And then when you go down the list, you will see a lot of it is related to biotechnology, because most of the monoclonal antibodies or others which are discovered are all coming under these group of, you could say, committees. Now, India has several regulations, and by far what is relevant to us is the first two. So you have the Drugs and Cosmetic Acts and Rule, which initially came out in 1940, just before independent, even before you could say we became independent. But there are several amendments to that which actually has taken place over the years, and the DC, or the Drugs and Cosmetic Act, actually is working through schedules. So you have schedule D1, D2, etc. And each of them, you could say, takes care of a different part of the drug regulation / manufacturing, etc. And from a clinical research perspective, the most important one is the new drugs and clinical trial rules, or the NDCT rules, which came out in 2019, which gave a lot of clarity to what was there in the Drugs and Cosmetic Acts and the rules. Now, coming to guidelines, again, there are several guidelines, and many of them are, you could say, helping the regulation or making the understanding or the implementation of the regulations easier or much better. So you have, these are the current ones which are in place. So you have the ICMR guidelines for biomedical ethics and research, which came out in 2006, then it got revised in 2017. The Indian GCP, which is the, you could say, the subject of the talk today, which came out in 2001. And then, of course, there are stem cell guidelines for stem cell research, rDNA, vaccines, and all that stuff. So from where does the Indian GCP takes its origin? So the mother guideline, as they say, is actually the ICH GCP guideline. ICH stands for International Council for Harmonization. Earlier, it was called as International Conference for Harmonization. But since several years, they have been calling themselves ICH, or International Council. This is actually started out as a group or a think tank, which included US, Europe, Japan, and all the other areas. And what they tried to bring in is that if you're doing a research study in one part of the world, how would other people in maybe other parts of the world say that you have done it as per or how it should have actually been done? So that was the hypothesis or the origin of the ICH. So that, say, for example, a research which is carried out in Europe, how can it be acceptable for people in Japan or for the regulatory agency in Japan to say that, yes, we agree to the study that was done as well as the findings that came out or the implications of that. So that was how ICH came into being. Now, ICH has several, you could say, countries who are signatory to it, which means that we kind of like agree to each other. That's what is the bottom line. India is having a status which is called as observer to ICH. So we are not full members yet, but we are still on the ring side. We are trying to see whether joining this is beneficial, or should we keep protecting the interest of India. And for many of you, I mean, these are all material which is present on the internet, as well as you can freely access them. So there are 13 principles of ICH GCP on ethics, that the benefit of the trial should be more than the risk. Trial participant safety should be taken care. Information on the medicinal product or the drug that is going to be used in the study should be known well. The study should be good quality. It should be compliant to the protocol. Medical care is the primary part of, you could say, doing the study, and the subject's safety and other things should be the responsibility of the physician who's actually part of it. And then trial staff should be well trained. There should be informed consent before a subject can take part in a study. Data should be recorded, handled, and so that it is accurate and it is interpreted well, etc. Confidentiality of record should be taken care. Good manufacturing and quality assurance and others are also part of it. Now, in 2000, there were a lot of discussion as to whether we can actually take care of all the ICH GCP guideline and say that, okay, we just run through it, or should we have our own version? Now, here is where things kind of like go wrong, and this is my personal opinion. And I've highlighted why I think where we kind of like went wrong. Everything is fine. I mean, you can actually make things better for India from our perspective, etc. But look at this statement, right? Considerable low cost or low per patient trial cost as compared to developed countries. We don't want to do studies in India because it is a low cost destination, right? We want to do studies in India because researchers in India want to find answers to questions which are important to patients in India. So that kind of like, I feel that defeats the whole purpose of this guideline in many ways. But all said and then, there are several salient points in the Indian GCP guidelines which are almost similar to that in the ICH GCP, and we'll talk in a moment about what are the differences. So the guideline talks about definition of GCP, what are the prerequisites for doing the study, that there should be a preclinical data which is generated, protocol, ethics and safety should be taken care of, responsibilities of different stakeholders in the research, record keeping and data handling, quality assurance, statistics, and then gives a lot of details on the different special situations like vaccine studies, contraceptives, medical devices, and then of course followed by appendix, which actually talks about some of the present guidelines. Now, where do we have differences? So if you look at the first part, which is on the qualification of the investigators, or who should be an investigator in a clinical study, what we have tweaked is that we said that the PI should be qualified as per the MCI rules, or Medical Council of India. Now we know that there's no MCI, it is more of a different animal now. So obviously that change has to come if it has to be relevant. We also call about specifically about investigators who have medical degrees from the US and UK, because that's also important. And a couple of changes with regards to SOPs, and nobody does all these things now, that SOP has to be signed. We actually don't do this. So ICGCP, I kind of like put on the other side, where we don't actually go into that detail because that's a more global guideline. Now, is it good or bad? I leave it to you to actually interpret at the end. Now, with regards to analysis of the data, there is this kind of like a specific requirement that PI should actually sign and forward everything, including analysis to both the sponsor and ethics committee. Nobody does this in today's time because that's all taken care of in a different way. And then there are, you could say, documentation requirements which sometimes make it difficult to actually see whether that documents are available or not. So it's very difficult for the sponsors, CRA or the medical monitor to find out whether there is compliance to this requirement in the Indian GCP. There are other additional elements with regards to consent. We have a huge hang up with regards to our genetic samples, right? And at that time, I think these were appropriate because there were concerns that the genetic samples from India could have actually gone abroad, and that could have led. But ideally, in today's world, there are so many tests and others that we do where the samples actually go outside of India. So again, while we need to have controls and guardrails in place, to kind of like think that there could be like, you could say, misuse of biological samples in a clinical study is taking things a little bit on the extreme side. Quickly moving into what now NDCT rules are very clearly calling out, but this is a very unique feature for India, which is one of the most key safety net that Indian patients have while participating in a clinical trial. You are eligible for medical reimbursement in case of a serious adverse event. You will also be entitled for compensation if the patient actually dies or has a serious adverse event during a clinical trial. This is not seen in any parts of the world. And even as an industry person, I feel that this is a great safety net for patients in India. I mean, without this, I think we would have a lot of challenges even outside. And then it goes on to one of the more controversial issues, and which is that the ethics committee has the power to order discontinuation of a study. And this can kind of like be at conflict with what is internationally practiced, that it's not an one EC which can actually call the shots. It's actually the independent data monitoring committee which actually will say whether the study is going appropriately or not. So earlier DCGI would actually say that you need to have an IDMC in India to actually do this. And sometimes it's not very easy to actually have IDMC in every country in order to pander to the requirements. Going on, there are several other smaller things which actually are of, you could say, of importance. The label should be specific to Indian investigators, etc. There should be retention of document until 3 years, whereas in ICGCP it is 2 years. And then coming to the last point with regards to informed consent form or source documents and others, many of this actually are documentation issues which may not have been thought through, because if you are actually having to place the subject's signed consent forms in a sponsor's file, that actually violates the subject's right of confidentiality. Maybe somebody didn't think through at that point in time, but now I think people kind of like make amends. So coming to my last couple of slides. So where are we? I mean, is the guideline relevant, or is it something which is not in sync with what is the current time? When it actually came out, there were several things which were relevant for that point in time. And even the regulatory approval letter would say that you should do the clinical trials according to drugs and cosmetic acts and rules, as well as in compliance with the Indian GCP guidelines. So that made the Indian GCP guidelines quasi-judicial. But now no longer the regulatory agency actually even mentions Indian GCP as a requirement. So I would think that there has to be a newer guideline in line with what is the current practice that has to come out. There was an effort which was started in 2018, but somehow I think it didn't kind of like come to fruition, and hoping that it will happen. All said and done, clinical research or clinical trials in India, the challenges remain the same. You would be amazed to know that even today, one of the big challenges is failure to properly obtain informed consent, failure to report SAEs and AEs, ineligibility of randomized subjects, sometimes even tampering source records and other. These are all issues which were there 20 years back and are still there in today's time. So regulations and guidelines are required, and it has to move along with the time. And hence, I would say that Indian GCP guidelines still has a relevance if it is now tailored to the current way. So thank you once again to the organization NPT for the opportunity, and happy to take any questions.
If any questions are there, participant can ask.
I think they'll have difficulty in unmuting. So let them put it on the chat box. We'll take all questions in the end. Is that okay, Dr. Sanish?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, sir. That can be done. So thank you, Dennis, sir, for your lucid presentation. We will move ahead. I request Dr. Jagruti Bhatia, madam, to introduce today's second speaker, Dr. Dennis Xavier, sir. Over to Jagruti, madam.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dakle. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I would like to extend my thanks to Dr. Dakle and Dr. Kamal and all the organizing team for giving me this opportunity. And I would say it is my privilege and honor to introduce Dr. Dennis Xavier. He is, sir is a distinguished and renowned scientist, and he has been listed among the top 2% of global scientists by Stanford University in 2021. So Dr. Dennis is currently professor in the Department of Pharmacology at St. John's Medical College, Bangalore. And he was also the ex-head of the department and is also vice dean of PG studies. He is head division of the clinical research at St. John's Research Institute, Bangalore. He is member of several international research steering committees. He is the principal investigator of NIH USA he's also for Center of Excellence for Chronic Diseases. He is chairman of the Doctoral Advisory Committee. He is also the national convener of Academic Consortium for Clinical Research in India. He has received grants from various prestigious funding agencies like NIH, CIHR Canada, NHMRC Australia, UK MRC, Wellcome Trust, ICMR. Sir has a vast experience and he has published more than 190 papers in prestigious journals like Lancet, New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, British Medical Journal, Circulation, European Heart Journal, and many more. So it is our privilege to have Dr. Dennis with us today for the GCP workshop. And Dr. Dennis will be talking on, his talk will be focused on responsibility of investigators, sponsors, and monitors. So I'm requesting Dr. Dennis to start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bhatia, for that kind introduction. I'll share my slide. Okay, as the slides are coming up, thank you, Dr. Sarish, for your kind words. You did such a superb job of being the opening batsman. So it looks like, 300 runs with no loss, or maybe 1 wicket, 300 runs, and made my job a little more easier. The second thing I want to say as I start off is, Dr. Sanish has got huge experience with clinical research, and he's given, a wonderful perspective for us, although it is general GCP, but from an industry perspective, and they know their, guidelines really, really well. I think it was just about mentioned that he's the president of the Indian Society for Clinical Research. I want to, urge all of you academics to today, or maybe in the next 2 days, please look up the ISCR website. And if you, just a few days back, we finished the annual conference, just look at the topics that are there. And every time I go to this conference, I'm a little disappointed that very few academics attended. All those topics are very, very useful for us. So I hope more of you would come to the next annual conference, which will be in South India. Right. And finally, before I start off, I want to tell you this is a wonderful time, a really good time to be doing clinical trials in India. Our rules and regulations are clearer, and then people are being trained, infrastructure is being built, and it's a good time. And once again, just taking a leaf out of what Dr. Sanish said, the reason we should be doing clinical trials in India is not because it is cheap or there are lots of patients here, but it is because we want to find treatments that are useful to alleviate pain, suffering, and reduce mortality. That's the reason we should be doing trials, and there should be no other reason. With that, let me give you the outline of today's talk. I'll be speaking about the following now. Sorry, my network is a little bit slow, so please bear with me. Okay, so I'll give you a perspective from my institution, which is academic, obviously. I'll tell you about academic clinical trials, and then come to the main topic today, which is, the roles of the definitions, the roles and responsibilities of the PI, sponsor, and monitor. And although it is not part of the curriculum today, I have one slide on the role of pharmacologists in clinical trials. So with this, I want to briefly tell you, this is all the sites that we work with. We actually work with about 220 sites in about 89 cities in India, and we've been doing this for over 20 years. And this is one slide to show you the different projects that we've been working on. These include observational studies, clinical trials, and more than half of the clinical trials are academic or investigator-initiated clinical trials, and that is the perspective that I would be giving you today. And the next slide gives you a summary of the slide. Sorry, just bear with me. There's a little delay with advancing my slides. I don't know why. Okay. Yeah, these are the summary of the work we've done so far. 52 studies, over 1.2 lakh participants, and some of our trials we followed our patients for up to 7 years with over 98% follow-up rates. And these are our publications in the Lancet, 20 in the main Lancet and 19 in the Lancet family, NEJM, JAMA, so on and so forth. And then we have the latest guidelines over here. And this is the new NDCT clinical trial rules. And this is the definitions of what an academic clinical trial is. And I want to put the same words in a full slide to show you that an academic clinical trial means a trial of a drug which is already approved for some other claim. And now this trial is being initiated by investigators in academia or in a research institution. This is for a new indication or a new route or a new dose or a new dosage forms. All these words are directly from the NDCT guidelines. I've not modified anything, right? And the results are intended to be used only for academic or research purposes and not for seeking approval for marketing or for commercial purposes. So that's important to keep in mind. Right. So if it's an academic clinical trial, no regulatory permission. So in other words, if you're initiating a trial with an already approved drug, you don't have to go to the DCGI, you don't have to fill SUGAM and go to the SEC for meetings, etc. So this is what the summary is. So no regulatory permission is needed for a clinical trial when it is intended solely for academic research, new indication, route, dose, or dosage form, and the trial has to be initiated after approval by the ethics committee, and the observations from or the results of such a clinical trial need not be submitted to the central licensing authority, which is the CDSCO headed by the DCGI. And the observations, again, the results are not used for promotional purposes. You can't say, oh, I have exciting results, and you call your friend from industry and say, why don't you take this and market it now? You cannot. But however, you are welcome to make presentations, publish it, and you can share it in conferences, and people can. You cannot commercially promote it. Now, how to proceed? This is how you should proceed. So you have to conduct this trial in accordance with the protocol, with the national guidelines that we just heard about, and must ensure right, safety, and well-being. Now, a little definition of global academic trials and local academic trials. Global academic trials, which I'm part of quite often, is part of an international study, usually initiated outside India. It can be initiated even in India. The sponsor is a university research institute, but not pharma. It can also be a government, but not pharma. Local academic trials are initiated in India, and the sponsors are academic institutions. Right, how do we go about it for global and academic clinical trials? For a global academic trial, you need the following: ethics approval, CTRA registration, HMSC approval. HMSC stands for the Health Ministry Screening Committee approval. You need import license if you're importing a drug, which usually is the case for global academic studies, insurance, and as Dr. Sanish mentioned, you must have a plan, even in academic studies, for compensation, medical management, in addition to insurance. SCA reporting is done to the sponsor and the ethics committee, not to the DCGI. And there is no need for DCGI approval. Yeah, as I just mentioned before. Okay. Moving on. Sorry, a little difficulty with moving the slides. Okay, so just to summarize the last part, there's no need for DCGI approval as well as SA reporting to the regulators. Right, so this is the ICMR guidelines for biomedical research in human participants. This came out in 2017. It's an excellent book, and it's you can freely download it. If you want to buy it, I think it's around 500 rupees, but you can download it from the website. Those of you interested in collaborating with Ayurvedic investigators or with Ayush, there is another very well-written book by the CCRAS. CCRAS stands for the Central Council for Research in Ayurvedic Sciences. And this was released after this in 2018. It was released. Again, a really good book. And I'll not go through the details. But the key thing is if you're doing an Ayurvedic trial, you need to have an Ayurvedic physician as part of the trial committee, and he should be at least a co-investigator, he or she, sorry. Okay, HMSC approvals, HMSC, these are the list of documents. I'm going to give you all these slides. So I'm not going to read out all this. I'll just tell you what the key issues are here. You need a letter from the foreign collaborator. If it's a multi-center study, you need ethics approval from 50% of the sites as well. This is something that we keep struggling all the time because in our studies, we have 30, 40, 60 sites. So if it is 60 sites, we need ethics approval from 30 sites before you even apply to HMSC. Now, once again, HMSC, their work is quite streamlined. It takes about 3 to 4 months to get the approval. Of course, you need CTRI registration as well. So the strategy here is quickly apply in your own institution, get ethics approval, apply for CTRI because that takes another month. In the meantime, other sites are getting ethics approval and you apply to the Health Ministry. So this is the full form, Health Ministry Screening Committee, which runs out of the Health Ministry. Right. So the HMSC approval, how does it go? The guidelines are formulated by the ICMR, and whether interventional studies or even non-interventional studies, that's important. Keep in mind, it's not only for trials, you can do a simple cross-sectional study. But if you have collaboration with international partners, you need to ensure to get HMSC approval. Okay, so this is the procedure. So proposals any time of the year you can submit. This is the website where you submit, and then it takes about 3 months for you to get it. So submit your documents well in advance. And now I've heard that they call for a personal presentation if required. Right, so this is the HMSC approval submission portal. It should be done through your institution. And this is another screenshot of the same thing. This is the CTRI website. I'll be sharing all these slides with you, so don't worry about this. Okay, so what are the steps for academic clinical trial? That was, or local clinical trial, that was global clinical trials. So the exact same list, but for local, you don't need HMSC approval, you don't need import license. However, there's a little caveat here. If you are importing a drug, even for a local trial, let's say the drug is manufactured only in Germany, if you're bringing it, you still have to go to the DCGI to get import license. And finally, you need to work through with the Director General of Foreign Trade or DGFT to get your import license. Right, moving on. What are the definition and roles of investigator, sponsor, and monitor in a trial? So this is what Dr. Sanish already showed you at the ICH guidelines. And this is in 2016, the amendment. There was an amendment after a long time. They came up with an amendment, and there are further changes to this. Okay, so these are the responsibilities of the investigator. So there are 13 different responsibilities, and it's very nicely listed out in this international document. And similarly, and Dr. Sanish gave you the, sorry about that, gave you the difference between Indian GCP and ICH as well. There are small differences here and there, and I'll leave it to you all to go through the finer nuances of that. So let me give you the key points. An investigator is overall responsible for clinical care and trial conduct. You have to be clear about that. And they're qualified by education, training, and experience. And they also have to assemble the staff and infrastructure to run this trial at their site. Now, who is a sponsor? A sponsor is responsible for all aspects of the trial. In case all of you were, in a big hall and we were all meeting in person, I would have asked you, what comes to your mind when you hear the word sponsor? I'm sure over 90% of you would say, or maybe even 100% would say, a pharma company is a sponsor of a trial. You are not wrong, but you're not fully correct, and I'll tell you why. So the definition is they're responsible for all aspects of the trial, including finding the investigators for the trial, which we heard in the previous slides. So sponsor is not just funding the study, right? They're not just funding the study. You invariably they fund the study, but they're not just funding the study, or they need not only be the funder. So in other words, all funders are not sponsors. I hope you got this. All people who provide funds for a clinical trial need not be the sponsor. They can also be, right? Who can be a sponsor? Okay, first, let's say a pharma company, a device company, or any other company that is bringing up. Now there's a lot of, AI and ML research that is going on. So a software company can also be a sponsor for a study, right? It can be a university, it can be the government, like we have done many trials with the ICMR, and now the NIH runs huge amount of trials. So the NIH in the US, so government can be a sponsor, an individual can be a sponsor. You can say, I will take on the responsibility, and you can get funding even from outside, right? But as an individual, as a responsible clinical trialist and a physician, you can be a sponsor of the study as well. Right. What are the responsibilities of a sponsor? It goes on to 19 different responsibilities, starting from quality management, quality assurance, the design, selecting the investigators, who's going to do what, compensation, financing, regulatory authorities, IRB, liaising with them and making sure their review is appropriate. Safety information, ADR reporting. They're also responsible for monitoring and audit. And today we'll briefly speak about monitoring. I think for audit, we would have another talk. All right. So what is monitoring? And what is an audit and what is an inspection? Let's quickly clarify this. Sometimes we get confused. Monitoring is routine quality assurance performed by the sponsor. Little while earlier, I told you who is the sponsor. An audit is an independent quality assurance, again performed by the sponsor. The sponsor will appoint, it could be an independent agency within their organization. When I say independent, they're not part of the study, they're not part of the trial. It can be an internal auditor. You can also have an external auditor. They'll go to specialist auditing firms, and the sponsor. So sometimes, in GCP, there are questions. It says, who can audit? So options can be, it can be the sponsor, or it is the regulator, or it is a one. No. So an audit is organized by the sponsor for additional quality assurance. All right. And auditor is independent of the trial team at the sponsor's institution. Inspection is done by the regulatory agency, right? And audit findings can be there, and then because of which the trial can even close, and the investigator, if things do not go well, may be blacklisted, etc. Inspection, they can stop the trial as well. But usually, if a trial is well organized, an audit is a good time to learn quality assurance and to ensure that we are performing the trial according to best practices. Okay, let's come to the last part, which is monitoring. What is monitoring? Monitoring is overseeing the progress of a trial to ensure that it is conducted, recorded, and reported according to all the requirements. It can be GCP, regulatory requirements, according to the protocol, and according to the trial SOPs. Now, when is monitoring done? It can be done before, during, and even after a trial is conducted. Purpose of monitoring, I'll not go through this. In fact, the next 3 slides has a long list of all the different activities, but I'll just let you, look at the slides, and I'll not explain much, just for you to know that it is being done, in a very, very meticulous manner, right? So who finds the monitor? It's done by the sponsor. They are trained, and then the monitor will have to carry out many, many different activities. So they have to be trained. They should have scientific and clinical knowledge to a large extent, and they must be really familiar with the investigational product, the protocol, the sponsor's SOP, GCP, and all regulatory requirements as well. Right. How much of monitoring should they do? How they should do monitoring, etc., is something on a case by cases that we work out in different trials and continue. Right. So let me give you, there are 3 slides listing out the monitor's responsibility, right? First, there are line of communication, ensuring the investigator has resources, making sure the IP is all right, the IP is investigational product, and making sure they are following the latest protocol, right? Including all amendments, informed consent is sorted out, the investigators brochure is the latest version and it is available, and investigator staff are well informed and they're performing their duties and enrolling the right participants and ensuring that there's good recruitment and documentation. And the third and last slide to list this out is to ensure that all documents are, accurate, complete, and that there's no errors, and also ensuring that adverse events are reported in a timely manner, and essential documents as well as any deviations that occur from the protocol, SOPs, etc., are documented and reported at the right time. So this is my last slide of the role of pharmacologists in clinical trials, right? So as medical pharmacologists, all of us are medically qualified. So we can be a principal investigator of a study. So you can be a principal investigator. However, there's one other caveat. Are we directly involved in clinical care of that participant is something that you have to think through depending on the trial as such. Okay, we can also be in a supportive role as a co-investigator. We can take care of several of the operational or logistic issues and provide support there. We know our regulations quite well. We are trained from postgraduate days or onwards these days. So you can provide regulatory inputs. You can help and support with IP management. You can help with assay reporting and ensure overall pharmacovigilance is taken care of for the trial as such. Budgets and funds management, monitoring, audits and inspections, you can help and support. And there's a long list. I'm not listing out everything. I reached the end of the slide, so I said let me put an etc. here. And in our institution, many of our investigators come to us for trial design itself. If they want trial design, many times they come to us for contracts. They ask us, oh, I received this 30-page contract, I don't know what to do with it. Then I ask them, what is your understanding and how shall we go about it? So we can perform many roles. So for that, dear friends, each of us should be familiar with the rules and regulations, with the procedures, and data management as well. If it's a local single center study or even a multi-center study, you can offer support with data management. And this way we work closely with our clinicians. You can be co-principal investigator and take on, equal or equivalent responsibility in running the trial. So to summarize, I gave you the difference between academic and global clinical trials. And I also told you before the formal slides began that this is a good time to be doing trials. So train yourself well, expose yourself, go to conferences, meet people, network, and do clinical trials or do clinical research for only one reason. And that is to improve the care of our patients and to improve health of our patients. For me, there is no other reason we should be doing clinical trials. We can do all others are secondary, tertiary, etc. So we spoke about the responsibilities of the PI, the sponsor, and the monitor. So remember, sponsor can be a university, a research institute. It need not always be a pharma company, right? And an individual can be a sponsor. And there's a difference between a funder and a sponsor. Keep that in mind. A monitor is a key person. He or she is a liaison between the central organization. It could be the sponsor, it could be a CRO, etc., and the institution. And then they make sure it's an ongoing process of quality assurance. And finally, pharmacologists have an important role in clinical trials. So train yourself as much as possible, and go and meet people, network, and get the right contacts so that you'll be able to participate in clinical trials. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Happy
much.
to take any questions now.
Yeah. Dr. Dennis, it was a very interesting presentation. You gave us a very nice overview of the roles and responsibilities of sponsor, monitor, investigator. Also, you explained very well about the academic and the global clinical trials. It was very nice to listen to your talk.
Sorry,
Any
Dr. Bhatia, I
questions
seem
in
to
the
have
chat
lost
we can
audio.
take?
I'm not able to hear anything. So maybe till I sort it out, you could direct the questions to Dr. Sanish first. I'm not able to hear you all.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Let me try to sort this out.
Dr. Dennis, I think we have actually answered majority of the questions. There is probably only one question which I thought I would leave it for you. Do we need CTRI for local academic trials? So do you need to register on CTRI for local academic trials? That's the only question that I thought was very academic in nature. So I can probably answer that on behalf of Dr. Dennis. So while I think the CTRI website is an opportunity for any investigator to register, registering on that for an academic local trial is not mandatory. But if you have like an academic trial where you're actually giving drugs, etc., that is interventions, it is better to register because that gives an exposure to, you could say, the drug as well as the study you're doing to other folks who might be doing a similar study in other parts of the world. So that could be one reason for you to consider that this is registered, and there is some level of peer review also that happens through that registration. No additional, yeah.
There is one more question in the chat, sir.
Yeah.
Can we use drug for new indication if it is carried out in academic trials and found to be successful?
Yeah, I answered that question. So the answer is clearly no. You need to have regulatory approval before you can actually use a drug which you might have studied in an academic clinical trial in your clinical practice. So very clearly, I think the very need for doing an academic clinical trial is that it can't be used for registration. So
one more question to Javier, sir. They want something about clinical epidemiology course.
Right. Thank you. So the first step is for us to get trained really well in, in research methods. And CMC Vellore has been conducting these courses since the 1990s. So that's wonderful. The Public Health Foundation of India, Delhi, through their other institutions are conducting these courses, and we have been conducting these courses as well from St. John's. In fact, this coming Monday is the 14th annual course. So since 2009, we've been conducting these courses. So do look up different websites and make sure you take advantage of these opportunities. So these are local courses. These are short-term courses. Of course, from PHFI, you can do, a degree as well. Which is long term, but there are some really wonderful courses in Europe, in North America, as well as in Australia. So, but of course, those are long term and very expensive. I was fortunate to do that from Canada in 2005. It's a 2-year master's program that I did. Yeah, thank you.
So I think there are no questions. So we can go ahead to conclude today's session. We are now marching towards the end of the session. I am very thankful to all office bearers of NPT for allowing us to conduct this workshop, as well as both the speakers, Dr. Shanice Davis, sir, and Dr. Dennis Javier, sir, for their excellent presentation, as well as both the moderator, Dr. Malhotra, sir, and Jagruti Bhatia, madam. Lastly, my sincere thanks to all participants for their active participation and patience hearing. With this, now I declare that today's session is over, and we will meet again.
Actually, sir, am I allowed to speak for few seconds?
Yes, sir.
If you
Yes,
allow.
sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So
Go ahead, sir.
this is some announcement because I am providing the technical support from the behind. So all the participants, they can join the WhatsApp group we have opened, and link has been sent on the email. We have opened the WhatsApp group for the asking queries, and our speakers and moderators, our whole team is available there for rest of the queries. This WhatsApp group will remain open for next 24 hours, and link of this session is available on the live YouTube channel of National Association of Pharmacology and Therapeutics. And we are very much thankful to all the participants, those who could not register for this GCP workshop due to delay in the registration process. We are wishing them best wishes for the next year GCP 2024 workshop. And with these words, I am declaring end of the session. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.